What's going on, everybody? It's Thursday night. It is the 29th, and I'm back after just being here last night. My mom's back after being here last week. How are you, Mom?
Good.
Excellent. So, last night, I really flipped the page on everybody very quickly last minute because of everything that's going on with Simone Biles and mental health awareness, and I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit tonight. Excuse me. So, it kind of just turned into a mental health awareness week. This was going to be the topic anyway, but we're going to jump from last night into this evening. So we're going to be talking about COVID and our mental health. So I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I'm sure everybody else could as well. But Mom, why don't you tell us about why you wanted to discuss this particular area of mental health this evening?
A big part of why I wanted to discuss it this evening is I see things are changing again. There's a lot of chaos and confusion. I feel like in some ways we're back to the beginning. I don't know if anybody feels that way. Not so much with the numbers and the deaths, but in terms of our brain. So I wanted to start with COVID has changed our brain. It's changed the way we think. I was listening to you and John Anthony last night. Good job. And I was thinking, I wanted to kick it off with this. COVID changed who we admire. Let's talk about that for a minute. Who we have admiration for. And the whole time you and John were speaking about Simone Biles, I was thinking about who are our heroes, who do we admire, why do we admire them? Now I see it slowly slipping away. So what happened? Here's what I heard at first. Oh my goodness. Hollywood, athletes, who else do we admire? I don't know if I could say politicians. The people in the public eye that we admire, but they weren't doing it. They couldn't have any help or assistance in saving us from COVID. Agreed? So
Sure.
slowly, you saw our heroes changing to who? To doctors, to nurses, to mental health professionals, to educators like your wife, right? You saw them become the new what? The new
Well,
heroes when COVID
nope.
first came out.
Well, I was going to say when COVID first came out, but that's not the case anymore.
That's why I wanted to do the podcast because I see it slowly slipping back. And
Hold your
so
microphone closer. Where's your microphone? Hold your
here it
microphone
is.
closer.
Is that
Yes,
better?
keep it right there. That's
So
what
I
I told
was
you the first time.
okay.
That's everybody
So
listening to the podcast. We are still mother and son. So when I ask her to put the microphone closer, say hello, Mom.
hi.
Oh, world's better. You're not echoing anymore. Okay, as you were. I'm sorry.
So I wanted to catch it before it slips. And so tonight I want to raise everybody's awareness about who do we admire, why do we admire them, what's the reality. So that's one way. I still think, Ryan, that there's somewhat of a change still there. And I hear you and Richard say, if I'm correct, that the movies haven't come back quite to the money they were grossing. Is that
Nowhere
correct?
near.
You're getting nowhere near, right?
No.
So I do think it raised awareness about who our heroes are. But the thing that I really wanted to talk about a little bit tonight, besides the obvious things that we'll talk about, how COVID changed our relationships, our finances, our attitudes, our anxieties, our depression, our use of mental health services. That's all the obvious things. But I wanted to talk about how COVID has changed our thought processes. So now we become so polarized. And as there's debate now, right? There's debate. Is this Delta variant going to be very harmful? Is it going to be dangerous? Should we mask? Did we give the wrong edict when we said not to mask if you're vaccinated? And do you see how people's thinking has changed to such a negative place? And of course, negativity is part of the root of all mental illness. Agreed? Once you
Mm-hmm.
start getting into that negative mindset, then you're more at risk for mental health. So I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about what I see. So here's my problem. Maybe it started with President Trump and that campaign, but certainly COVID intensified it. I don't think this country has conversations anymore. They have confrontations. I don't think we're listening. So if somebody comes, I have patients that I work with, and they do not want to get vaccinated.
Right.
What do you think their biggest complaint is? When they start a debate with somebody, what's the biggest complaint? When somebody's saying that they don't want to get vaccinated, they're saying the doctors aren't listening. Nobody's listening. They're saying you have to. We've become a you have to now in society. You have to do it. Listen, I'm not taking a position. I'm vaccinated. I'm in healthcare. I feel I didn't have a choice if I wanted to see patients. That's my personal decision. But I'm so concerned about how the thinking changed that we can't have debates and conversations. And that I go back to that word that we're polarized. We're now a right wrong society. And it's filtered. It filtered into, I don't want to get off on other topics, but didn't it filter into George Floyd and that debate? We become right or wrong. You can't have a reasoned conversation. Do you remember when Judge Kavanaugh was ready to be confirmed for the Supreme Court, and Dr. What was her name? Chrissy Ford Blasey or Blasey Ford. So I made one comment that maybe she wasn't so credible. Maybe she wasn't so credible because she was young. And people went off of me and they said, what I hate when they say, how could you have a PhD and JD and make that statement? Not even a minute to let me explain what I was thinking. You see what I'm saying? We don't have reasons conversations anymore. And this COVID debate right now, the resurgence of the variant has started that same thought process. It's not what I want you to teach your kids. I want you to teach your kids not to have these emotional arguments, not to have these right and wrong thinking patterns. I want to change the brain back so that we can have intelligent conversation and get away from that black and white. What do I always say about mental health? Get away from that black and white, right, wrong thinking. It will filter. If you get away from it and you refine your thinking, it will filter out the anxiety and depression. And so that's part of what I wanted to speak about, to really start to listen again. If somebody doesn't want to get vaccinated and you say you must, what's that going to trigger if you know anything about the psyche? As soon as you tell somebody they must, what happens?
Then they don't want to do it.
They say, I must not. I must not. But go ahead, I interrupted.
Well, I was going to say, I think there's this misconception that things were actually, you could have a conversation with somebody pre-COVID. I think it's been, people are going to disagree with me on this, but I don't believe that people have ever really been able to have a nice, healthy debate with people. I think that that's a little bit of a dream, if you will. I think that, of course, just like even in today's day and age, you can have a healthy conversation with the right person, but I don't know. I think I'm always indifferent on that one. I think that people have, for as long as we've been, the human race has been around, there's been disagreements. That's where I'm at with that. But yes, there's just a lot more to disagree on in the last year.
But you don't think that COVID has changed and had a more negative impact on the political system and society? You don't think it's separated us? I agree with you. We were headed in that direction. I don't want to say who, but there was people on TV, on maybe the conservative channels, that talked about the dumbing down of America. You're right. They talked about that. And what they were talking about was this very topic, the inability to be able to have an argument, a disagreement with logic, and what I always say, facts, not opinions, or to be able to say when you're having an opinion and not do this right and wrong, and you must, and you have no choice. Because as soon as you tell somebody you have no choice, you're not going to get a good result. I was listening to John Anthony talk about, I don't know if he used the word anxiety. He uses the word, help me out, maybe vulnerable and threatened and those kinds of words. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, you want to talk about mental health. So what's behind all of this? What's behind all these feelings about COVID? Fear, anxiety, whether it's fear of the virus, which I'm more on the science end with some more fear of the virus, whether it's fear of the government and they're trying to control you, fear of some foreign body that came in, whatever it is that your fear is, most of this problem is based on fear. And I was thinking about what John was saying. So in my experience, fear goes to anxiety, and anxiety goes to what? To aggression a lot of times. So now we have this aggressive debate. And I sit here as a mental health doctor and say, are we ever going to convince anybody of anything with the aggressive debate? So supposing, Ryan, you're a physician, you believe in the vaccine, you want to try to get as many people vaccinated. What about saying, let to your patient, your imaginary patient, saying, hey, maybe I could give you 10 minutes. We could look at some facts. Would you like that? Could I get some research together for you? There's none of that. I never hear that. I never hear somebody say, the doctor said, well, let's sit down. And I admittedly, doctors are smart, myself included, mental health people are. But just to have that kind of a dialogue. I haven't heard of it. Have you? I don't know what happened with your job. If they said you have to.
No,
it's a choice.
No, it was a choice. And the choice was if you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear your mask. If you're not vaccinated, you do need to wear your mask. So it's yes. Well, I guess I'm right there with you in the sense that I agree that, but I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like it's all gone way too far. And people are going to be like, oh, this and that. Listen, I'm vaccinated too. I'm with everybody. I want everyone to get vaccinated. If you're willing, if you're not, then people are going to disagree with me on this one. I can think what I think, but I'm not gonna give anybody a hard time. But I can. I don't know. That's just where I'm at with it right now. My mindset and thought process on it may change later on. But yeah, I think that we've all been quarantined for too long. I think too much has happened. Of course, it popped off in the worst possible time ever during an election. So the question now, because we said the obvious about what's happened with COVID and our mindset and things of that nature, how do we get back on track? How does one get back on track? Because things are still going off right now. We're going to start seeing more mask mandates be rolled out, and then that's going to cause more aggression, and it's going to cause more divide, as if we didn't need any more divide. So what would your 3-step plan to get back to normal be? As a mental health professional, if you had to put out 5 steps, we'll give you 5 steps. You got to put out a pamphlet and you got to help everybody get back to normal. What's it going to be?
So it's funny you said get back to normal, because the first step would be there is no more normal. So it's a new norm. I don't believe, I'm not a PhD in microbiology, but I don't believe that the virus is ever going to completely go away. I think I'm one of those theorists that'll say it'll be like the influenza. So I don't want to do, my first step would be, let's not do that all or nothing thinking. Let's say that we have to live with this peacefully. So that would be my first step, to redefine a new reality. My second step would be something I said in a podcast a while ago. This is really about adaptation, isn't it? It's really about what we do when we have to make a transformation and a transition. So I would ask people to think about what skills they use when they have to transition to another chapter of their life. And the third thing I would do is what I said on the podcast about communication, to start to listen and not challenge. So when I'm listening to somebody, this is how I'm listening. What in their psyche and brain is making them think that way? Not how am I going to change their opinion? We have to have a different paradigm. So we have to shift from not how am I going to change their opinion to what's making them think that way, and understanding. We're so far from that, aren't we? Yeah. And I don't know if you're saying, I think what you're saying is, hey, Dr. Mom, we weren't in such good shape before, right? With the thought process. And there was a lot of this, but I've never seen it really to this level.
What does it do to the human? What does it do to the human brain, to our emotions, to our anxiety, when we see politicians, news anchors, the press secretary, the journalists, all tugging on us as the children, like mom and dad arguing as if we were kids? What does it do to the brain when we see people behaving like this through the media, tugging? You get information everywhere. Let's just say information. We're not going to say misinformation.
Right.
You're scrolling down the news. One person says this thing. Another person says this thing. The FDA says this, but the former FDA director says this. The CDC says this, but a former CDC member says this. One doctor says this. It's just too much on the brain. So what does that do to the human brain, first of all? Because that's a lot of self-discipline, or being able to disregard all of that information and do a little more research at a better pace, does it not?
Well, I think it's funny you said that, and we just hit a storm pocket. The picture went out, but I think that what happens is, hold on a second. Oh, there.
Just keep talking.
So, but I can see. So I think what happens is, not to pick on the president, but I read this morning in preparation for the podcast, I like to look at the news, what the climate is, that Biden, I don't know if it was a week, 2 weeks ago, said no masking for vaccinated people. And you know what he said today? Let's vaccinate in certain areas.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Everybody, the CDC said the same thing. Fauci said the same thing.
Right.
Everybody
but this
said
is the
same
president.
thing. What?
Okay,
No, but I'm
this,
saying, but that's what I'm saying is that it's not just one person. There's so many people saying different things, the same thing. So what does that do to the human mind's ability to trust somebody or a body of something, the government, whatever? What does that do to our brains? How are we supposed to calmly think all this through when we just keep getting bullshit pushed our way?
Well, you have to change your mindset. You can have a very difficult time, and you can bump up your anxiety by saying nobody knows what they're doing and have that ugly dialogue about mistrust of the government. Or you can say, look, nobody's doing this intent. Let's go back to what I always say with communication. What's somebody's intent? So I don't believe it's the intent of the president or Dr. Fauci to mislead people. I don't believe that's the intent. I think you have to go back and say, we're figuring this out as we go. This is what I say every day to people. The mindset for me is we're figuring it out as we go. We really didn't know what would happen because we haven't been exactly in this situation. We have to really, really flex that muscle of flexibility and lower our expectations. And I just wanted to dovetail with something that I don't know if we got into that last night with you and John, but when we admire these heroes, when they're disappointed in Simone and some of the other people who've had mental health issues, there were a few other athletes, I believe, who put things on hold, is because we have these unrealistic expectations. We like to think.
No, wait.
Right.
We're getting away from the topic.
Well, I think we have unrealistic expectations of Dr. Fauci, the president. They're unrealistic expectations. They've never been in this situation. So you can choose to look at it as trust, or you can look at it as unrealistic expectations because they're literally figuring it out as they go. Are they not?
Right. But I think that the one thing that you and everybody else needs to take into account is every single person has different mental capacity to take things in, a different ability to reason. Not everybody, some people are better than others. Some people are not as gifted in that area. People's access to information. All right. My dad pointed this out one night and I thought it was a genius thing. You like to think to yourself that everybody has a cell phone. He said, well, try going through a toll booth. Not everybody has an Easy Pass, and you think that would be an easy one right now. So the point I'm trying to make is that we can say what we think people need to do or could do to be able to handle this information better, but that in itself is unrealistic. So what do we do about the bigger problem, which is all the information coming in at once? What can they do on their end as well?
Well, let me just back it up from one pace. So I wish that the powers that be would start to make things more temporary. They say these things like they're blanket statements.
Okay, right? I think that's a very good start.
It's a good start, right? I wish from the beginning, I can't understand for the life of me. Maybe you understand because you're more in the quote unquote business corporate worlds of it. But why didn't they just say what I'm saying from the beginning?
Well, that's the one thing I'm thinking.
Right. We're figuring this out as we go.
That's the one thing I'm thinking. The President Biden had everybody over to celebrate. The city of New York had fireworks and spectacles. It's over. It's over. And now you look like the parent who told us we were going to go to Toys R Us, but really we're going to grandma's house.
Okay, but that's what I was trying to say when I was going back to the athletes. Who's our heroes? What is our society about? And some of it's based on fantasy. So what were they trying to create? Listen, if I had some kind of graph, I could tell you that I can tell you as somebody who owns some investments, that as soon as they say everything's rosy, what happens to the stock market and the investments?
It goes down.
Well, no, when they say everything's great, it goes up, right? So business, right. As soon as they say everything's great, give it a few days, the market goes up, then what happens? People go out to eat, they're spending. So this is fueled. John said something last night, basically, that everything in the end, it's all about corporate America, right? That corporate, he made some comment, something about that. So in the end, they're making these grandiose statements because what? Because what does the president get measured by? What do politicians get measured by? How well the economy is, don't they? Isn't that a yardstick that they're measured by? So they want.
I think it's one thing, but I think it's much different at this point in time as well. Just success in everything overall.
Right, but they want business rallying. No president wants the restaurants closed down, right? Your industry got hit so hard. So we create these fantasies. And for the life of me, at this point, maybe in the beginning, they wanted to create some fantasies because everybody was so alarmed that we have this under control. Trump and his "it's not a big deal" kind of thing. But at this point, right, I 1,000% agree with you. All Biden had to say was for now. Why aren't they saying this could change at any time, but for now? And then I think that would help people's psyche. But here's the but. People don't have to be.
Is that everybody that's talking actually isn't good at talking to people in general, and that's why they're doctors?
That's true, but
no, I'm just kidding. But no, a lot of them I would say aren't. I'm sure you can speak to this, and if anybody you're listening, you've definitely spoken to a dry personality doctor. Some doctors just do not have bedside manner; they just tell it like it is, and it's like, well, I didn't want to hear that. You could have delivered it a little bit better. There could have been some sort of emotion behind it, but
that's a whole other topic. But just to go off topic for 1 minute, women will pick their doctors by their personality. Men will pick it by skill. That's just a little psychological in general. So, but let's go back to what people can do. So the public now, JQ public, can now adjust their psyche and say, I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to make it temporary, which is one of my skills for happiness. I study what makes people happy. And what makes people happy is to not rely on anything as permanent. That old thing about life's a temporary assignment anyway. So don't make anything permanent. So imagine if when you're listening to the news and they said, again, this better than me, they had all 25% the restaurants were open, then 50%, then 75% capacity. Imagine if you can make that little indentation in your psyche and say, just for now. Anything goes. By now, I want to encourage everybody to say, just for now, just for today. Really, that one day at a time, that mindfulness, that making things temporary, and saying as much as it gives us anxiety, we're living in very uncertain, different, unique times where I don't think anybody knows. Who knows what's going to happen?
Who was the mental health advisor when the COVID virus came out?
I really don't know. The top person.
They have a mental health advisor?
Well, they have somebody who's like at National Institute of Health. They have people in charge, but they haven't really come out that much.
Wouldn't you say that somebody had to have been, wouldn't you say, and I'm probably going to get scolded for this, there would have been some benefit if somebody was able to go toe-to-toe with Fauci, Trump, the governors, whatever, and be like, listen, I can tell you right now, you were fine at 2 weeks. You're pushing your luck right now. You're going to drive everybody mad. And I don't mean figuratively. I mean that you're going to drive people to the brink and bad things are going to happen. And here's one thing that I was thinking about that I just can't stop thinking about because, I guess because I'm on the road all the time. This is a big one. Deadly road rage incidents across U.S. have police increasing presence on the streets. So Irving, Texas is the one that pops up here. Remember in Florida, a young boy was killed in a drive-by road rage incident. They found out later on that his mother apparently did give some sort of negative gesture to the driver who pulled out the gun and pulled the trigger. Not saying that that's an excuse for the gentleman to do what he did. A child's life was lost. The point is that road rage also is at an all-time high. So we see active shooter situations, road rage incidents, people we don't even know. That's how much people are on the edge, right? It doesn't even have to be a buildup. People are just on the edge.
People are on the edge, but they're on the edge because of everything we spoke about just now. So we talked about how COVID affected the brain, how polarized we are. The arguments are not cogent arguments anymore. They're
So what
very
did you think?
emotional.
What did you think was gonna? What did your gut say when they extended quarantines? What did you think people were going to do?
Back in when are you talking about now? After
After they were like, no, it's not 2 weeks, it's 2 months, it's 3 months, it's 4 months. We're shutting down restaurants at Christmas. After you realized it wasn't going to be 2 weeks, what did you think was going to happen to people?
I knew that we were going to have an increase in mental health problems. I knew that you're going to have more depression and anxiety. I want to save some time to talk tonight about how we underestimated the anxiety of children, how we underestimated the kids with ADD, the kids with learning problems. And we thought we could flip a switch and have them be remote learners. It's ridiculous. Ask Monica, ask your wife. It's absurd. These are kids that learn in a different way to begin with. So I knew that it's going to create anxiety, because I think Marla made a point I saw here about, isn't part of this really, what are we rebelling against? The lack of control. This has been a time with really such a lack of control. Economic downward mobility. You want to hear about that road rage and aggression. We haven't even begun to talk about how it's affected people economically. The topic tonight was how's COVID changed our lives. I'll defy anybody to call in and really tell me one occupation that wasn't hit economically. So they might say my field, healthcare. Healthcare booms, right?
Retail.
Well, retail, but healthcare they'll say is booming. But if you're in healthcare, and even if you're doing better than ever because insurance companies increased our rates, we can do telemedicine, blah, 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 blah. But then maybe somebody in your family was hurting that you had to help. You see what I'm saying? So I think everybody was affected by it economically. I think it harms just about everybody in some capacity if you really think about the big picture. It took away jobs from that whole pool of people. We see people who are, under the table workers, right? So it hurt them. So you have so much frustration in the country economically, lack of control, not being able to trust the politicians, every day being bombarded with a different message about the virus. And I want everybody to understand that many of the people who are against the vaccine understand that the CDC never really approved the vaccine as anything other than an emergency vaccine. So there is it's not based on pure emotion when they don't want to take.
Well, that's another thing. What does it do to the human psyche when Fauci and Biden, whoever, and again, I'm saying that with a toe in everybody, but I'm not Fauci, Biden haters, all right? So just relax before you start coming at my neck. What does it say when this got approved for emergency use last December, and Fauci and Biden say it probably won't get CDC approved until February 2022? What the hell does that say to people?
Right. You know what it says. It makes them not trust. But nobody's listening when they say that. They're just turning them off because they're calling them Trumpsters and government haters and really not listening. So let's pause for a minute. I think we have a couple questions. You want to read them to me?
Marla just said, do you think if it wasn't because of the election, people would have handled COVID better? It seems like it became political and was used to pit us against each other. They used the fear to divide. I don't agree with that statement at all, I should say. I think that one of the big things, and obviously you're going to speak and be the doctor, but I think the big thing was the miscommunication, the time it went on, and the election just helped put fuel on the fire, because the election didn't do anything to the timeline, right? Trump was trying to open everything up sooner. The timeline was just the timeline per the governors following CDC guidelines, and then eventually the CDC would come to trip over their stances as well. So I definitely would think the election played a part in fueling the fire, but I don't think it was the main reason. You?
Well, I just want to add to what you said. I think here's what I think is tragic. I live in fear of saying I didn't really hate President Trump. I thought he did some good things. Now, why do I have to live in fear of that? I live in fear that if half my practice heard this, they won't see me. And so anytime I said something to somebody I was working with, no, I don't hate Trump. I don't know enough. I'm not in Washington. I'm not a politician. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. I haven't firsthand read his policies. I know he did some good things in the criminal justice system.
So what do you think
So
about Marla's
I
answer?
so I think to Marla's point, it's Marla's going back to what I said at the beginning, that I don't know if it became politicized. I'm more saying the whole political system became black and white. You're not allowed to make a statement without being jumped on. You can't have a discourse. I think the better way to look at it is look at all the negativity that happened to our political system. Why do I have to live in fear of saying I don't love Biden and I don't hate Trump?
So are you saying that you're disregarding the points that I made, which were physical and mental, and you keep talking about Biden and Trump?
No,
What do you think about what I had to say?
I,
Because
I'm
I said it was the length of
sad.
the time. I said it
No,
was the length of the time and what people were doing and the miscommunication.
but I think what I
And now you're
said.
talking about Trump and Biden.
No, I'm saying the same thing that you're saying. I'm saying the process started years ago. That we were building into this kind of process. The content fueled it. And yeah, I do think it was part of the times we were building into that anyway. That's where we were headed anyway, and these events made it even more so. I'm just reframing what you said to another way to look at it, but it dovetails with what you're saying. So I want to go back to what you said about the road rage and what's happened. You have to look at the state of how people have gotten injured. So every job from Hollywood to sports, every job was impacted. I think for the first time, we realized that nobody's immune from downward mobility or not doing as well. Because what's one career group that didn't get uh, affected by this? Did you ever think, Ryan, because you love the movies and things like that, did you ever think you'd live in a time where TV movies would be shut down? And that did you ever think the stars would be affected? That maybe they wouldn't make as much money? Could you and Richard have ever even fantasized that?
No.
Or the sports people, or the business people, or restaurants. So I think that gave people a lot of anxiety, and that fueled a lot more mental health problems.
Right,
Because
but that's what I was.
well, I was just going to say everything that we believed in got shaken up, shooken up, whatever. I need an English person, right? Everything we believed in became vulnerable.
So I don't know if we answered the question or you answered the question. What's going to happen if they start implementing the mask and they try to quarantine? And are people's minds literally going to shatter? Can we expect the world to just collapse at that point? What is really going to happen if they start doing all of this again?
I think you're going to see a higher incidence of what I see every day in my office. I think you're going to see more depression, more anxiety. We have people who are so scared to go out now, right? They were just starting to recover and slowly go out. What do you think is going to happen to them? So I think you're going to see higher rates of the mental health problems. I really feel sorry for the people who had anxieties about going out and slowly were going out and now hear this. And what do you think they say? They say, see, I shouldn't have gone out in the first place. So I anticipate that. I see already with the kids thinking about starting school, anxiety, anxiety, because they thought they're going to go back to school and not mask. Does anybody know? I don't even know what the policy is now. Do you?
Philadelphia said everybody, teachers and students need masks again. Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia school district. The state of New Jersey, as of right now, Governor Murphy is still leading it to discretion as far as, I would say, school district. But that's a tough one because the schools say, well, we're going to follow the CDC guidelines. But I know that Council Rock recently had some board member changes, and like the next day before Governor Wolf even lifted the mask mandate, this recently elected person had everybody on the board agree with her or whatever happened, and suddenly masks were optional. This is before, so I don't know what's going to happen. That's the craziness too. The mandate hadn't been lifted, but this person the next day, 1 week before school was over, got everybody to say masks are optional at school. So I know that my wife's not looking forward to it. I know that I'm not looking forward to it. But I mean, I don't know. It's a tough one. People are legitimately scared of COVID, and they're allowed to be. All right, COVID is no joke. We know that. COVID has taken lives, but
It
now
ha-
it's now everyone's mental health is going to be in jeopardy as well, and obviously not everybody, because let's be honest, there are people who are mentally strong enough and doing well enough to weather this storm and be like, well, when things get back to normal, it'll happen. But then there's other people where it's like, well, the what is it, the eviction thing it runs out this week
I heard
or
that. Yeah, I
next
was
week, right?
surprised. Yeah,
So that's going to run out.
I was
They're
surprised
implementing
about that.
masks. It's just like
But they might
people are.
change. When they might, I read that eviction thing and said, well, it's going to depend on what happens. They could very well change that eviction thing again, right? It's not, you don't know. So when you hear that, the people who get really upset need to kind of chill and say, just like I said, let's wait and see what happens, because they could change it again. Because as you said, it's chaotic and nobody knows what's going to happen when we go back to school. So it's really about how do you live with this chaotic environment? Who do you trust? Because nobody seems to have any answers, right, that are stable and suiting everyone. So we have to adjust our thinking. That's my whole point. How do we get into everybody's psyche and adjust our thinking and say that one day at a time, be mindful? How do we have intelligent conversations, not based on emotion? And how do we say that we're in very challenging times? What skills can we look at? What tools can we look at? Those happiness skills where people do well in these kind of turbulent, chaotic kind of times. And yes, school's going to kick off all that chaos all over again. And parents are already asking, should they homeschool? What about if their kid has anxiety? Should they keep them home and avoid the whole situation? But
What's
don't you
funny?
think, yeah,
I was gonna say, what's funny? People are going to do it. People are going to do it. That's something that I realize happens. If they put the mask mandate up, people are going to do it and bitch and moan, and it's fine, but they're going to do it. But what worries me is like the long term. What John Anthony and I are always talking about, and you're always talking about, the long term trauma that lays below the surface, and you think you're good and grand and everything's fine, and then suddenly you realize there's things in life that, I know John C doesn't like this word, but they trigger you, right? You start having flashbacks that, I was stuck in quarantine, and this happened or that happened, and I remember my parents arguing about politics and the vaccine, and taking it out on me, and my dad lost his job, and everybody, that'll happen too, right?
oh
And
yeah, oh yeah.
obviously more violence will continue to occur. It's very sad. I post on my Facebook all the time that we must be prepared for violence, because I think that pre-COVID, and I think during COVID, I'm always looking over my shoulder. I'm not paranoid. I'm much better than I used to be. But yeah, if I'm going out to dinner, I want to be able to see the front door, and things like that. But I kind of get off on a tangent there. But to me, I'm more concerned about what's going to lie beneath the residual effects if all this keeps going.
But to your point, we see things we never saw before. You mentioned trauma. So the people I work with who lost people, unfortunately, to COVID, it's not like anything I have ever seen in my life, because their family members suffered 10 days, 13 days, 15 days. And what happens when people are in the hospital dying? You're with them. You're visiting them. I have never, in my 30 some, almost 40 years of practice, seen anything like this. So
Oh,
they're,
to
right?
everybody who's listening right now, somebody told, one of Monica's friends told us a story that somebody, the wife got taken to the ER and got taken back, and it was something minor, something, whatever. But they came back and they said, your wife died, and they said that they wouldn't let him back because of COVID. I would burn the hospital
I know you.
down. You would not be able
I
to
think
hold me
that,
back. There would not be enough police, anybody to be able to hold me back from seeing my wife if something like that happened, and especially if I wanted answers. So yeah, I can't even imagine what that's like because I would just be going out of my mind. I would be just destroyed.
and I know my son, so I think about that, and I know that would happen not just with him, but with some other people. So it's a trauma. You see what I'm saying? That even the mental health people don't know what to say or how to deal with because we've never seen it before. Where have we seen that? The closest thing we saw was when, God forbid, somebody lost somebody in an accident. But then at least they could say, "Well, how could I have been there? It was not." You know what I'm saying? But when they were laying in the hospital and couldn't see them, we're dealing with a new kind of trauma that we never saw before. I don't know. I hope some people who are listening saw the story of Adam Josephs on the news and how his kids got COVID. Did everybody see that? The weatherman,
Hmm.
and how he's now lamenting that he made one mistake. He let one family member come that wasn't vaccinated. But we all probably did something like that, didn't we? We probably all
Yeah.
let our kids around. And now he,
On
and
Great God,
now,
we all were outside, no masks,
exactly.
hugging, kissing.
Right? So we all did something like that, and then the kids get sick, and now you have another level of trauma of questioning everything you did. So again, we're going to see
But
more.
then that doesn't make sense because
in,
if you're under 2, you don't need a mask.
right, but he's questioning why I don't know who it was.
I know, but I'm
And
saying
then-
in general,
I know.
it goes on to the ongoing confusion that people need to and people are going to be like, "Oh, he's an anti-masker." No, I don't like the masks. I'm
I hate them.
vaccinated.
Who
Shut
likes
up.
them?
So shut up. If they're like he's an anti-masker, no, I made a joke. That's not a joke, but it's also a joke in the sense that we're talking about how kids can contract it, right? Nobody's arguing that. And it happened, and his kids got it, which is very sad. I can't imagine what that was like. But you don't need a mask if you're under 2. So it's a never-ending cycle that is tarnishing my mental health. No, I think I'm doing much better than I would have been doing 2 or 3 years ago. But okay, did we answer the question yet about what people can or what it's going to? Yeah, we did answer that question. So just give me 1 second. All right, so now let's turn this whole thing into something funny. Can we do that?
We can try.
All right, so let's try to make light of this entire situation. The one good thing that happened, not the one good thing, the many good things that happened for me during COVID. Yes, the many good things that happened to me during COVID. I welcomed twin boys. I got to have all my kids under the same roof, which was awesome because for 3 years I barely saw anybody because I was in New York, which again, no regrets. That was a great journey and chapter of my life. My wife and I took advantage of the time together and had some really long, in-depth conversations that didn't just span one night, but probably over the course of 3 days. You could pick up where you left off because you were with that person. And I would say our marriage and our relationship is better for it. So I guess my advice to people as we get towards the end of this is that if oh my God, if we start going into quarantine again, if you're ever in a situation that you find you don't want to be in, hopefully you're in a safe spot or you can make it a safe spot. Try and find the best in that situation because, listen, I get it. We all were like, how many TV shows can I watch? I watched everything. I'm going crazy when I'm going to get called back to work. But, John Anthony would say, well, what can I do about it right now? I'm not going to get lost in my negative fantasy. So that's what helped me survive. That, and we're just talking about good things that came out of COVID. So what's some good things that came out of COVID for you?
For mental health, the greatest thing was the telesessions. We have less rates of cancellations. We have, I see a lot of disabled people, so they can get to their sessions. Parents thank me because when do we see kids? We see kids during what I call those twilight hours, those awful hours, 4 or 5, 6 o'clock after school. So the mom can be in the background. Sometimes in the telesessions, I catch the moms making supper or doing whatever they're doing. And we have a higher success rate with them keeping their appointments because it doesn't interfere for anything. So it has catapulted telemedicine and telepsychiatry in a way we couldn't have imagined. And I think that's here to stay. So that's been a great thing and a boom to the business. I think it's upgraded the respect for my fields, because where would we be without mental health professionals right now?
I don't think that happened.
I think there's some more respect. It's not where it has to be.
I'm kidding. So what was a good thing that happened to you that came out of COVID?
Well, like I said, I could do personally, professionally, it was great because of the telesessions.
Now, personally?
Well, wait, I want to say some other things about professionally. And we got to see families in my practice. I got to see families doing what you said, to rearrange the work-life balance, to concentrate more on their kids. There was a lot of good things we saw. I saw people cultivate hobbies, and take up things that they couldn't take up before. But for me personally, I got to have some of that downtime and to do some things that I didn't get to do, because no traveling to 3 different offices. When you're home, you're home. I think it was better for my eating habits because I could eat at a more regular time. And it really made me think about what it is when you leave the house and are gone 12 or 14 hours and not back in your home. So there's so much more I could do within the house. I got to move, to sell my house, some things, personal things that I wanted to do that I had some more time for, because we eliminated that travel time, which was amazing. And just running an office, as you know, is time consuming. But so, of course, it's not all bad. People hesitate to talk about the good side of COVID because people died, because so many people died, and the deaths. So people feel a little hesitant to say there were some good things that came out of it. The best thing overall, though, I think, Ryan, for families is what you said, that work-life balance, the having more time at home, the being happy, the not running, the not having to run out, but being home and do things at home, be more home-based. People really started to say, my house is my castle, and do home improvements and make the house. So many people I encouraged, if you could afford it, if you can do it, make that house the way you want it and make it comfortable.
Well, we all can do it because we got the stimulus checks. Marla said, I think we learned to appreciate the people and things in our life. We slowed down and really focused on what was important. I agree with that as well. So now this is one thing that I think is going to be a positive, and I hope nobody fires me for saying it. And I said it last night. So as we head towards the end of the show, it's something that I want to talk about. When Simone Biles withdrew from the Olympics, let me say this loud and clear for the people in the back, for whatever reason she wanted to, and she doesn't need to explain herself if it is mental health or if it's not. So let's stop bashing her. All right now. I'd appreciate it, because that's one thing that that's my main, while we're talking about it, my main defense in the argument of mental health. Well, she did this, well, she did that, she did this, and she did that, right? And that right there is the problem. That right there is why the stigma will never go away, because people who aren't as confident or strong enough as Simone Biles will definitely not say how they're really feeling or do what they want to do, and they'll keep pushing themselves to the brink because they feel like they have to stay locked inside their heads and their thoughts, and that's what's going to be the fuel behind the stigma, which is what it's always been. Nobody wants to talk because nobody wants to listen, right? That's what people say. So that's why I say Simone Biles doesn't owe anybody an excuse. She did what she did. That's it, period. And she's confident enough. She's successful enough. People might be like, well, what about the people that aren't confident or successful enough? Right. Well, maybe you should stop giving them shit for wanting to speak. Okay. So, but where I was going with that was, I also said, I think this is just the beginning. I think in some ways people are hardened by COVID. Somebody's going to say to their boss, you're not going to tell me what to do. No way. COVID taught me that. Life is way too short. You know what? I quit. Thank you. I quit. I'm going to go DoorDash or Uber until I figure out the next step in my life. I think that's something that employers need to prepare for as the days and weeks and months go on. People are really going to stop taking shit. A lot of people became entrepreneurs. A lot of people did what they really wanted to do. A lot of people moved the next chapter in their life, but I think people are really going to stop taking shit as the years go on.
And the employers need to look at there'll be an onslaught of lawsuits because people consult me as an attorney and say, what can I do? My employer says I have to have it. It's against religious beliefs. It gets into constitutional law arguments. It's against my religious belief. I don't want to put anything foreign in me. So I think there will be a lot of legal action from all of this too, because I'm not sure what the answer. I don't know. It's groundbreaking territory, right? Because
Right,
nobody
but how
knows
how
what's
many
going to
people have
happen.
come in and told you? How many people have come in and said to you, "Nope, after COVID, I'm not doing this with him anymore. I'm not doing this with her anymore. Nope, I realize life is too short." Like I really think that people listen, and I'm going to use one example, and there are other reasons behind it. Law enforcement is one of them. Yeah, suspects are becoming more disobedient. I know
Mm,
there's other factors. We don't have enough time to get into that. It's a whole other podcast. You can hear my thoughts on that eventually when Richard and I and everybody else get to it. But just people in general, we in my current situation, right, with my employer, we hire someone. They figure out it's not for them very quick, right?
hmm
Get somebody else. It's not for me. It's not for me. Okay. And I just think people are not, and you see it with the workforce, people are not going out to get jobs, right? That's again another topic, but I think part of it is people are not going to do what they don't want to do anymore. I just think it's going to be a thing. They're going to be like, "No, you told me to wear a mask, you told me to get a vaccine, I was told to do this. I'm never going to do what I don't want to do ever again."
Okay, so now you're getting to the heart of some of the mental health changes that we see. So when the young lady Simone Biles was sent, what she said this morning, I thought was just so beautiful. She said, "Thank you to my," I'm paraphrasing, of course, but "thank you to my supporters who made me realize I'm more than the sum of my talents and athletic prowess, if you will. I'm more than that." So I think what you're saying is, for my generation to your generation, my generation was, we are what we make, we are what we work, right? In our psyche, that's who we are. She can be a role model and leader for that statement she made this morning. We're more than that. There's more than that to life. I came from a generation of you do it no matter what. You're dying and you do it. I was passing a kidney stone and wouldn't cancel. Anybody knows how painful that is. And wouldn't cancel my last session. I should have gone to the hospital. I waited to go to the hospital till after I had the session. It's absurd. It was ridiculous what I did. So you hear what she's saying? I'm more
Yeah,
than
you
the
did something. You
summation.
did something stupid.
It was really stupid.
Yeah.
I I applaud her for saying that I'm more than that. And that's what I think your generation and your daughter's generation will start to say. We're
I hope
more.
so.
I think she was. I think she's groundbreaking, trailblazing in saying we're more than that.
Well, that's why
The,
I said to John Anthony last night. I said that sometimes mental health can be this weird balance where the example I used was I have 500 people attending for an event today. And if you have to take a mental health day because you're not like you're really down in the dumps, there's no way that you can get through it. You are already working on getting through a traumatic event and you're having a bad day, it would behoove you to call out. I want people, I would like to see people really take care of their mental health. I would like to see my daughter's generation, my son's generation take care of their mental health because that would be like world changing behaviors if everybody right, you don't want to do it in a negative way, you just want to take care of yourself the way you need to take care of yourself. And if you're in that position, you don't need to be rude about it, you don't need to be like, no, leave me alone, I just want to be left alone. You can say, yeah, I need to be alone tonight.
no, but she's getting some backlash, isn't she? It's going to change
There's a lot of
slowly. She's
backlash.
getting a lot of backlash because people what? Because people have an unrealistic expectation. Because they like to use John's word. They like to have the fantasy that she's. I don't know. You know this is super heroes better than me. That she's like a Batwoman or Batman or Superman or Superwoman. We have unrealistic expectations. That's why I said we should do future podcasts. That there's so many other topics on that. What are the expectations of athletes? Does anybody really care about them after they make their money? What happens to them as they age? What happens to them when they get injured? Right? Can you
There's a lot
imagine
of
their psyches? Because
well,
they feel
yeah,
put out to pasture, don't they? At 30
who the
years old?
athletes?
Sure. Athletes,
Yeah.
models.
Well, there's some people that you see that they're a different level of competitor, which is fine. They just like Tom Brady, he won't turn it in until he's Brett Favre was the same way. Those are the first names that come to
He's,
mind.
but he's kind of one in a, he's
Floyd
kind of special.
Mayweather. That's what I'm saying. There's people that I think the term that I would use that I've heard used when it comes to certain athletes is bulletproof.
Yeah.
Like that's legitimately who they are. They're just born to be. And it's not to say that like Simone Biles isn't born to be. She is an Olympic athlete. She is a gold medalist. I saw a video today where she did like some matrix flip like 4 times, and like it was just unhuman. Like just it didn't.
That's what I'm saying, right?
And people like, well, that's people go, well, that spot could have gone to somebody else. Yeah, if that person earned it, they would have been in front of her, but they didn't. So relax.
Yes.
She backed out.
If you go, 2 things I want to say before we finish. If you go back and listen to your podcast, it was uncanny because you almost predicted what she was going to say this morning. It's uncanny because you got there before she did, because you were saying about taking care of yourself. And then this morning, she was thanking everybody who supported her because she wants to take care of herself, right?
Well, wouldn't you say that's
uncanny?
Wouldn't you say that's one of the stages of mental health? Is at first you're, in some cases, you're nervous, you feel bad about calling out or whatever, but then you think about it and you're like, no, I did that for me. I did that for me.
Then you're right. That's that balance. I would change that word. Yeah, balance is one of my favorite words, but I'd probably say the ability to accept. I talk a lot about acceptance, accepting the human condition, but how anybody can bash a young woman who's 24 years old. How many medals has she won? If she stopped now, did she win 5 gold medals? And look at her net worth. It's $90 to $100 million. So if she stopped right now, she's set for life, and she did that at 24. So why are we bashing her for being attentive to her needs? Because something in society happens when we have celebrity status that we think we own them. We think somehow we own a piece of her and that she owes us something. So we have to change that mentality. That we definitely have to change.
Very first tumbling pass.
Here, watch. Wait. Oh, okay. That flip is crazy.
Unreal.
He's crazy. Sorry, I just had to pull it up real quick.
No, I think that's great, and that's what we want. We're pissed off that now the fantasy that she's real, or that she was super real,
human.
That she's human, right? We don't like that. Same thing with COVID. It gets us in touch with our vulnerabilities. Science is still much more an art. Medicine is much more an art than a science. But the other thing I want to say is, I wonder how COVID affected her, because weren't the Olympics postponed a year? And
postponed a year. Her brother was just acquitted of murder. And John and I mentioned that last night. There's a lot going on. There's people who would not want to walk in her shoes if they thought to themselves that they would want to be a gymnast. And what I mean by that is, people always see the end product. You don't realize how much training, discipline, sacrifice goes into being a collegiate athlete, let alone an Olympic athlete. And imagine just, you got to get up for training the next day. You want to do something, but you can't. You got to go to training, and you keep thinking about what you want to do and what you want to do. And then finally you get to the Olympic stage. You're pissed off you didn't get to do what you want to do. And you say to yourself, nope, this isn't worth my well-being, my mental health, my well-being. I'm not going to make it. My head's not here. I'm just going to step away.
Yeah.
People don't realize the buildup. That's what annoys me.
Oh yeah. And what she accomplished and what she's trying to accomplish for mental health and pacing yourself. But I'm telling you, get out there and be careful about who you admire and why you admire them and what you admire. Because a lot of what we admire is the non-reality. We want to believe there's some life form it's not reality. Everybody's subject to the same problems, no matter how much money. I want to say one interesting thing about the haters of her and the fighters of her.
Yeah.
You know how sometimes we don't have empathy for wealthy people? So here's the psychological finding.
Yeah.
If you are part of the class of the person, so other athletes, they'll have the most compassion for her if you're part of that class, very wealthy. But if you're outside of the class, you start to blame the person. If you're inside the class, you do what you just did. You say, let's look at all the external things. It was COVID. It was the alleged criminal charges on her brother. It was this, it was that. You have to be inside the class to understand it. When we're outside the class, we blame the person. When we're inside the class, we are more willing to look at external things. I thought that was a fascinating finding.
I'm in the class of mental health, all right, that's for sure. All right, so
Which is why you're sympathetic to it.
well, I try to remain sympathetic. But yes, that was another great episode here with Dr. Mom. It is Dr. Mom Podcast. So it is Dr. Joan Feinstein's podcast. I'm just her son, Ryan, and I help her out with it. So be sure to like and subscribe to her podcast. It is available on Spotify. It is also available on Podbean, Spotify, Google Podcast, excuse me, and Amazon Music. So, yep, make sure you like and subscribe and follow the podcast, and we will see everybody next time. Good, Mom? Happy? Say bye?
Yes. Until then, be careful out there.
We'll see you.